Good morning. My name is Lande Ajose, and I am the Vice President and Walter and Esther Hewlett Chair in Understanding California's Future and a Senior Fellow here with PPIC. Thank you for joining us today. PPIC is pleased to present this two-part program to discuss how California can address the homelessness crisis across our state's diverse cities and communities. For the first part of today's program, I'll be talking with Carolyn Coleman, the Executive Director and CEO of the League of California Cities. And in the second half, I'll be joined by two of our terrific mayors, Mayor Todd Gloria of San Diego and Mayor Karen Go of Bakersfield, to discuss these issues. But before we get into our program, I have a few housekeeping items. First, as a public charity, PPIC does not take or support positions on any ballot measure or legislation, nor does it support, endorse, or oppose any political parties or candidates for public office. Today's program is a part of PPIC's 2022 speaker series on California's future, and I'd like to thank our sponsors for their underwriting support. These organizations are listed on your screen and also on our website. This series is also funded by the PPIC Donor Circle and the PPIC Corporate Circle, groups of individuals and organizations that provide generous support to PPIC. And finally, before we begin, if you have a question for our panelists, please send an email to the email address on the screen, ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. Please include your name and organization along with your question, because we'll be answering those questions as they come in, so send them as soon as you have them. And now I would like to introduce and welcome Carolyn Coleman, the Executive Director and CEO of the League of California Cities. Carolyn, welcome.
Thank you, Lande. It is a pleasure to join you and Mayor Gloria and Mayor Go this morning for this very important conversation that we're having.
Well, we are delighted to have you, and I couldn't start this program by also saying I was delighted to be able to share the stage with you last month at your annual conference, and I'm very, very grateful that you've been able to come and be on our show this morning. So thank you.
We loved having you.
Well, you know, we want to get into this by just thinking big picture. In your view, what's the most important thing California can do to really help our cities address homelessness?
Well, that's, of course, an excellent question, and it is one that I know here at Cal Cities and our mayors and council members and city officials across the state spend a lot of time thinking about and designing systems that will make a difference. You know, I never could say there's just one thing that would most help us address homelessness, because I think it's many things. But let me talk about, I think, three big buckets that would help us. The first, let's try to prevent homelessness in the first place. I know that as a state, we have spent the last couple of years, and I appreciate the efforts of our legislature and our governor taking the resources of the state, and we've been able to enjoy some budget surpluses, but putting those back into the very systems that can help prevent homelessness. That's into affordable housing. That's into strengthening our education system. It's in strengthening our healthcare systems, and it's strengthening the workforce development system and our economy. That will go a long way to enabling more Californians to be able to thrive and to stay out of homelessness. The second thing that we can do in California to help cities address homelessness is continue to do what's happening today. You're going to hear, those of you in the audience, you're going to hear in just a few minutes from a couple of our mayors who are on the front lines using the resources they have at their disposal from the local government, from the state government, as well as the federal government, to innovate and transform and come up with creative new solutions to addressing this problem. What we know for sure is that one size doesn't fit all. What works for Bakersfield doesn't work for San Diego, doesn't work for Grass Valley, California. But kudos to all of those at the local level who are using their political will to innovate and to come up with new solutions, many different ways to address homelessness. So let's keep the innovation going, particularly at this unique point in time where we have a new infusion of resources from the federal government, with the CARES Act, with ARPA, and certainly with the investment investments that the state government, unprecedented investments that the state government has made in this last budget and the year before to help local governments address this challenge. So innovation at the local level. The third thing that I think is important, and I don't think enough is said about this, there is a significant role for the federal government in helping our local communities address homelessness. We really need a partner in the federal government to come to the table with resources of the scale that match the magnitude of this crisis. The state alone and our cities alone, by design in their structures, their budget structures, don't have the financial wherewithal to solve this alone. We really need a stronger federal partnership. So the one other thing we could do is for Cal cities and our counties and the state of California to join with our counterparts across the country to urge the federal government to play the role they should be playing in helping us address what is really not just a California crisis, but it is a national crisis.
Thank you for that. And I want to follow up on that because, in recent years, there have been significant investment in homelessness, both from the state level and from the federal level. Can you talk about, one, have those funds made a difference? And two, in what ways have they made a difference? Because there's always a call for more resources, but I think the public wants to know, well, how are those resources being spent? So can you give us a little bit of a sense of the ways in which the investments to date that have been allocated to cities have made a difference in their ability to solve the problem?
Lande, these resources have certainly made a difference in our communities. We can go back to 2020 and 2021 with the CARES Act, and then followed by ARPA, and again what the state has done recently. The dollars are making their way to our cities. This is the one time we appreciate the federal government is saying the check is in the mail and we're on the way to help you and to support you with resources. These resources have shown up in our communities in a number of different ways. And again, you'll hear some more specifically about this from our mayors, but we're talking about new navigation centers in our communities so that those who need help have a place to go and they have resources that can help connect them to housing supports, to behavioral supports, and the other supports they need. We're seeing new innovation in our cities with these resources going to fund new city departments that help ensure that the city is accountable with the dollars they receive for addressing homelessness, and to better enable the city to show the public how they're using these resources and the difference that they are making. We've heard in a partnership with states and the state and the county and local governments across the state for a number of months now, the way the project Home Key resources are being used to transform underutilized motels and hotels into safe shelter in our communities. So there's a wide array of activities, again, tailored to fit the local community and their assets that are at work today, helping one individual at a time. I think it's important to remind folks that we find ourselves in the situation we're in today with the homelessness crisis as a result of a crisis that is decades in the making. I know that we often want the problem addressed and resolved overnight, and there's certainly demand for quick, easy solutions to this. But the reality is lasting solutions are going to play out over time. So yes, we can talk about, again, the mayors will do this in the call today, and we certainly have started to see more data from your organization as well as the state that help talk to us about the difference that these dollars are making. And while we're nowhere near the end of this crisis, every day in this state, another person is getting housed, and local officials are working hard to ensure that those who are in safe and healthy housing remain so.
You mentioned that this problem is decades in the making, and it seems to me that another challenge with homelessness is that it's not just a single issue, but it's a combination of issues. And so for those who are unhoused, it is about shelter, certainly, but it's also about economic security. It's also sometimes about behavioral and mental health issues. For those of us who are neighbors to those who are unhoused, it can be a public health issue. It can be a public safety issue. And I'm wondering if you think cities have sufficient resources, not just money, though certainly money, but human capital. Do they have sufficient shelter to really address all of the varied issues that really are at play for our unsheltered population?
Well, what I know for sure is that cities can't go it alone.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly, the concept of, when we think about what's the secret sauce for success and really the secret sauce for progress in this area. And I often think about it, Lande, in four different ways. One, it's about partnership. Mm-hmm. It's about local governments prioritizing homelessness with the resources they have. You see a number of local governments who are passing local tax measures to help fund and support addressing homelessness. It's also about local governments being able to partner with strong community-based organizations. And we see that up and down the state. It's about the political will. If this is truly a priority, then it has to show up in budgets, and it has to show up in other resources being dedicated to this. And of course, cities can't go it alone because they alone can't produce the revenue streams necessary to support and invest in meaningful solutions to address this crisis. And so each and every day, the mayors on the phone and others across the state are not only using their dollars, they're using state dollars, they're using philanthropic dollars, and they're using federal dollars, and bringing all of those together to make meaningful change and progress on this. But to underscore, cities cannot do this work alone. We need real partners in moving forward.
Great. And, some of those partners are on the private sector side. One of the key drivers of homelessness in the state has simply been the state's inability to build enough housing to keep up with decades of economic growth and of population growth. And I'm wondering kind of what California cities are doing to respond to the state level push to develop more housing, especially affordable housing.
Another great question and a top of mind issue that is intimately connected with our homelessness challenge. So I mentioned earlier that there are a number of systems in our state that are critical to preventing homelessness. Our system of housing, particularly affordable housing in the state, is important. We've all heard, if you've been in California and in our space in any time in the past, you've heard about the loss of redevelopment dollars that were a sustainable source of funding to help support affordable housing. Affordable housing doesn't happen on its own. It takes a source like what we get from the federal government. There are CDBG dollars, there are home dollars, there are others that support affordable housing. But again, there was a strong role for the state with the redevelopment dollars. So what do we need to produce more affordable housing in the state? I say a very important start is to have a sustainable source of funding to help produce and build affordable housing. We've seen in the last couple of years, and I really applaud the legislature and the governor for including multi-year investments in the state budget to help address homelessness, because it won't be solved in a year. We won't be out of our affordable housing crisis in a year, and we need sustainable sources across both of those systems to make meaningful long-term impact.
I want to follow up on this issue of redevelopment dollars, because as I recall, those dollars were eliminated by Governor Jerry Brown early in his tenure as governor the second time, when the state was in a budget crisis. He actually, when he was mayor of Oakland, used redevelopment dollars to good purpose. So what was it that you think was going on that prompted him to eliminate that as a sustainable source of revenue for building affordable housing? And what if it were possible to bring back redevelopment funds, what guardrails would need to be put around that so that whatever he saw that wasn't happening as it should wouldn't continue to happen if those resources were available?
Well, Lande, we have a limited amount of time this morning, so I'm not going to go too far into all the reasons why redevelopment was eliminated. In some ways, it depends on where you were sitting. Why that happened. So I'm willing to look to the future and say that what I think is important, if and when we get another robust tool like redevelopment to use in our future, that accountability guardrails will be important. I think it will be important to target those resources, just as we're seeing happening at the local level today when new revenues are raised to support homelessness. I think it will be important to target those resources for investments in affordable housing and infrastructure to support affordable housing.
Okay. Last month, Governor Newsom signed into law the California Assistance Recovery and Empowerment Act, which establishes local care courts as a way of creating treatment plans, which can include housing for people with severe mental illness. What difference do you think care courts are going to make in helping cities to address homelessness?
You know, I think given the strong need, I mean, this issue of addressing homelessness is top of mind across the state. Your own research shows this. I was just listening to a report around the Sacramento region this morning that shows the very same thing. What I think we know in California at all levels of government, and public and private, is that new and different tools are important and they're needed to help address the problem and to address the crisis and to make sure that more of our folks are housed with the kinds of supports and resources they need. So applaud the passage and the enactment of the Care Court bill. It's new, it's innovative, and it gives us one more tool in the toolkit to help ensure that those who need those kinds of supports the most have access to them. And so the League of California Cities was a proud supporter of the Care Court bill. We worked very closely with the sponsors and the governor's offices. The governor's office with some changes to how it was originally envisioned that we thought would help make cities a stronger partner to seeing that move forward. So we are excited to be a part of the innovation that will move that system forward, because again, at the end of the day, we need more tools in our toolkit to address the different kinds of needs and reasons that folks are unhoused today. And Care Court creates an opportunity for us.
So now that Care Court, has been inactive, what are some of the keys to effective implementation at the city level? What's required?
Well, I think it goes back to the secret sauce of success I talked about earlier. It's just going to be about strong partnerships with cities, with counties and community-based organizations, as well as the state. It's going to take political will to make the change to move this forward. Certainly there were new investments, not only in, I don't want to get into too many acronyms, but the HAP program to help address homelessness at the state level. But there were also new investments specifically tied to addressing behavioral health needs. That is important. And then, of course, it's back to partnerships.
Great. So I want to explore this issue a little bit more, because there's a strong relationship between those who are unhoused and behavioral health issues, mental illness, substance abuse. I was reading the Los Angeles Times, and they had some reporting that suggested that in LA County alone, somewhere between 20 and 50% of the unsheltered suffered from mental illness, and somewhere between 27 and 46% struggle with substance abuse. And I'm wondering what you see are the opportunities for cities to strengthen behavioral health systems, and maybe not cities, maybe at the state level also, to really help address homelessness.
Well, I wish I knew more about that. That is certainly an area, Lande, where I'll be talking with my county counterparts to help inform and educate what that's going to take. It's going to, and we all know to start with, it's going to take funding, right? But but it's also going to take, and I think Mayor Gloria and Mayor Go will allude to this because it's some of what they're doing today. You described folks who are unhoused for a wide variety of reasons, some related to substance abuse, some related to other forms of abuse and challenge. And I think, again, we're reminded that one size is not going to fit all, even in having a care court system. I think we're going to have to ensure that there are the outreach and trained outreach caseworkers who in essence are back to navigating and helping match a particular person who is unhoused with the supports and the resources that are part of the system that will help that individual get housed, and not just in a shelter, but make their way onto a pathway to permanent housing.
So, you know, I was doing some prepping for this and I was reading up on encampments. And over the course of 1 year, I learned that over 1,000 encampments had been cleared by the state, which resulted in removing 1,200 tons, over 1,200 tons of trash, which was enough to fill 22 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Some cities have turned to banning encampments altogether. Certainly from places like sidewalks and business entrances, schools, libraries. I'm wondering what you were thinking, that how effective these local ordinances have been in terms of really addressing the issue of homelessness in cities.
I think, Lande, that the local ordinances recognize that, you know, particularly at the local level, these issues are always a balancing of interest. I think all of us can say that, you know, it would be great if we had the resources to ensure that encampments didn't exist in the first place. And I think we can all agree that the goal here is not to move folks from one place to another and just move on. I think when it comes to encampments, I know so many city officials are focused on how do we ensure that the situation is not dangerous, and how do we ensure that folks have access to health. Left unattended, I think there's the reality and the experience at the local level that these situations can become dangerous and they can become unhealthy for everyone involved. And so certainly enforcement mechanisms like we see with some local ordinances are designed to get at that. But I think we all realize that an enforcement mechanism that might move folks, as we've seen here recently, from Block A to Block B, that can't be the solution and that can't be the answer. And while we're doing those things, there also continues to be a commitment to move folks to being housed and into permanent housing.
So, you know, another trend that we've seen has been like safe parking approaches. Have they been effective in cities? Is it different from? Yeah. Safe parking, has that worked?
Let's talk about safe parking. I think it is another, like care courts, like navigation centers, it's another tool in the toolkit. And I am as excited as you are, Lande, to hear from Mayor Gloria, who has rolled that out in San Diego. I think what we have to applaud here is that we're trying new things. And that means using the bully pulpit of a mayor's office and the political will to say, this is not a perfect solution, but it is less dangerous and safer for all than what some of the alternatives are. So I look forward to learning more about the safe parking and the results San Diego has seen.
Good. Well, we will definitely ask. So let me go to an audience question that's just come in. It feels like we're putting too much focus on permanent housing and failing to provide shelter for those who need it now. Why is there not an investment in creating communities of micro houses while we wait for long-term housing solutions to be built?
I think that's an excellent question. And while there's certainly an emphasis on permanent housing, I think there are communities across the state and certainly across the country who are experimenting with communities of tiny homes. And maybe that is a permanent solution for folks. So I think the goal here is to think about this as a continuum, right? That moves people from being unhoused into housing, but that's not to say that permanent housing should look the same for everyone.
You know, one of the during the pandemic, or as a result of the pandemic, the state implemented a number of innovations, new key tools in the toolbox, if you will, such as Project Room Key and Project Home Key, to address the number of unhoused people across the state. And I'm wondering what those efforts have meant for cities and how they have informed or could inform how cities address homelessness moving forward.
I think they give us, if we're looking at this as a continuum, I think those tools give us some more options in the toolkit. I think what is true for many instances, though, is that the funding, there's a fiscal cliff. If we don't locate or have a long-term sustainable source of funding, then what happens to the units that were set aside? They're subject to being at risk and lost to the system. So I think for the certainly for the course of the pandemic, that was a really important, helpful innovation, but it's going to need funding to continue.
So thinking of funding and looking ahead, we're about to enter a new year. We'll have an election next month. We will have a new budget year coming about. We'll have a lot of new legislation, which will be implemented as of January 1. What progress do you expect to see in California City in the coming year? How might we have some tangible sense of progress?
Well, I think, again, I think we have to manage our expectations. We're not going to solve the homelessness crisis overnight. We will have new resources come online in 2023 that will be invested. And it is certainly my hope, Lande, as an organization, that we can be a part of the system that helps share great innovations across the state so that even more communities will have access to options that might work for their own. That's why I think a call like this morning and hearing what Mayor Gloria and Mayor Go are doing is so important. You mentioned our conference several weeks ago. Again, we appreciated you being there, but it's an important opportunity for city officials to network with each other, and as I often say, steal good ideas from each other and take them back to your own communities. If we are going to have a chance of going to scale, certainly we are helping one individual at a time move into safer and perhaps better options for their lives. But if all of us are focused on this, what a difference we can make in so many lives.
Well, Carolyn, we've come to the end of a very, very fast half hour.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you so much, not only for being here with us this morning, but for your enormous leadership in really helping to work in partnership with cities and other stakeholders around the state to make sure that we make some tangible progress on these issues, to making sure that we lift up some of those innovations, some of those items in our toolbox so that we can customize the solutions for homelessness in each of our very diverse cities and communities. We're really, really grateful to you and your organization for the work that you do, and look forward to being able to continue to partner with you in any way PPIC can to advance.
Wonderful.
So
thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, Carolyn Coleman. And at this moment, I am delighted to be joined by two of California's distinguished mayors, Mayor Todd Gloria of the city of San Diego and Mayor Carolyn Coleman of the city of Bakersfield. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you both so much for being with us this morning. We really appreciate it. So I want to start first by reminding our audience to certainly send us some questions if you haven't yet at ppiceventquestions@gmail.com, and we'll be working those into our conversations with our city mayors this morning. I want to start with each of you with kind of a quick and dirty assessment, if we can, around how homelessness is playing out in your cities. I'd love to get what's your numerical rating of how things are going on a scale of 1 to 10, and 2, give us 1 or 2 examples of what you're doing to address homelessness. And why don't we start with Mayor Go?
Thank you so much for having us this morning. I'm going to give the city of Bakersfield a 6.5. Over the last couple of years, we've had many successes, but we're also learning our limitations, and we're also learning that there's a long road still to go. In Bakersfield, we started addressing the impact of homelessness, responding to the concerns of our residents and businesses by cleaning up litter and debris that was being left. Then we built a 150-bed city-run shelter and contributed to the creation and expansion of the other 3 major shelters in town, adding more than 600 new shelter beds. Next, we added street outreach to all the shelters to convince persons to accept the care. But previously, street outreach was minimal because there weren't enough of shelter beds available. Our existing shelters were consistently full. Here's where something changed. With the 2020 pit count, we flipped the number of unsheltered versus sheltered persons. In other words, there were more people in shelters than on our streets. Bakersfield continues to make significant investments in affordable housing, permanent supportive housing. These investments all were very helpful, but even if all of our cities invested significantly in all of these pieces, it wouldn't be enough. We cannot clean our way out of homelessness. We cannot build shelter beds out of this crisis. California faces a mental health and substance abuse crisis. There isn't a more visible manifestation of this crisis than the hundreds of homeless persons living on our streets in grave and inhumane circumstances. We hear from businesses and residents who are experiencing the impact, but we also hear from so many families who've had their child lost. They've lost their child because of schizophrenia or serious drug issues on the streets. Their loved ones are ending up in a system that's not engaging them. We watch in horror as people decompose before our very eyes. They're cycling in and out of our shelters without any meaningful intervention. Care Court is making a difference. I'm hoping we're going to talk more about that. I'm so grateful for that HAP funding, which has enabled us to move forward, but there's still a long road ahead. I'm eager to engage in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Mayor Go. Let's turn to Mayor Gloria. Same question. How would you rate homelessness and how your city is doing and addressing it? And give us some examples of what you've done to try and solve the problem.
Well, Lande, thank you for this opportunity. And you probably just got a taste of why I enjoy working with Mayor Go so much. She shares my passion on this particular issue, her command of the issue. I would agree with what she has said. I mean, it is a national epidemic. It is not unique to San Diego or to Bakersfield or even to California. I have to share with this audience, through my service in the U.S. Conference of Mayors, as well as with the League of California Cities, there is not a mayor I talk to that is not focused on this issue, that is not really frustrated by this issue. We're all experiencing it, both the high cost of housing, which is exacerbating this problem, as well as the twin challenges of mental health issues, things, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, et cetera, as well as substance abuse and specifically methamphetamine and fentanyl related abuse. These are just conspiring to create a perfect storm of bad circumstances on our streets. Now, that said, the city of San San Diego is doing more than we ever have on this particular issue. In my less than 2 years as mayor, we've increased shelter capacity in our city by 38%. We've done that largely by utilizing public facilities and properties and converting them into shelters. Parking lots to old buildings with more underway. And every shelter bed is an opportunity for someone to not just get off the streets, but to get into permanent housing and not return to the street. We have created streetwide or citywide homeless outreach efforts that are focused in every council district, as well as along our public rights of way, and specifically along our freeways. And the encampments along freeways are particularly dangerous, and it's why we've utilized state funding to try and focus on those areas to reduce the encampments that folks see along those dangerous corridors, with some attention given to us by the state of California, particularly Governor Newsom, for the efforts to try and reduce the numbers of people living along our rights of way. So we've expanded outreach, we've expanded shelter, and we're having to build more housing. I just broke ground yesterday on a 100-unit affordable housing complex in the San Ysidro neighborhood of San Diego. 25 of those units will be reserved for the formerly homeless, and we got more underway. Point is that despite doing all of these things, people continue to be extremely frustrated. They don't see the progress that they would expect to see with this all hands on deck effort. And I understand that. I share that frustration. But rather than throw my hands up, I engage and more deeply committed to driving change on this issue. My hope is as we continue to make our way out of the pandemic, let's note that expanding shelter capacity during a pandemic is not an easy thing to do, both because a lot of this sheltering is congregate, right, and that's not necessarily helpful. Whereas, and the Great Resignation has also been a thing for finding workers to do the outreach, the shelter work, and etc. These are all challenges that we're working our way through. My hope is that we can get through this period and get to something that more equivalent to pre-March of 2020. And the last thing I would just say, I don't really want to reemphasize what Karen said in terms of mental health. The mayors have been extremely vocal on care court and on conservatorship reform. We got care court this year. I think that's great. And I'm glad that San Diego and the county of San Diego specifically is going to be one of the first counties to implement. But we have unfinished business when it comes to conservatorship reform. And I believe that the mayors of this state will engage deeply with the legislature next year to get that job done. And as we do that work, I hope that we'll train a focus and attention on fentanyl and opioids. Just quick fact, Lande, in 2017, we had 2 homeless people overdose on fentanyl. They died as a result of that. In 2021, it was 113. And so in a very short amount of time, you've seen an exponential growth in this product on our streets, and it's killing people generally, but many of them are homeless. We can't adequately address this issue without addressing that fentanyl crisis.
Thank you. That actually is a really good, both of you, explication of so many of the dimensions of this problem. So I'm going to try and tease them out. And I want to start with just your role as mayors. You as mayors are on the front lines of this problem, right? And one of the key issues is managing public sentiment around homelessness. The PPIC statewide surveys show that most Californians say that in their communities, the presence of homeless people has increased over the past year. And so I want to know, what are you hearing from your constituents in terms of how they're feeling about homelessness? And how does it affect your positions on public safety? Let's start with you, Mayor Gloria.
Sure. Well, that polling matches what I get every single day when I'm out in the community. I think the best word is frustration. They see efforts that cities like Bakersfield and San Diego are doing, efforts that the governor and the legislature are making, and yet the numbers continue to increase. And in the city of San Diego, our median rent is somewhere around $2,600 a month for an apartment. It's no surprise if you have rental rates of that nature that you're going to see more folks on the streets. And we don't talk enough about the mental health crisis. We have a cultural stigma against discussing mental illness. And as a consequence, people don't really understand why this is happening, but they see it happening. What do I do about it? I do my level best to try and educate folks, to try and dispel myths. It's often said that our great weather in San Diego is an attractor for homeless folks. But the fact of the matter is, when we survey our homeless, the vast majority, a super majority, are from San Diego. So that's maybe a portion of our challenge, but it is not the lion's share of our challenges. There's also a number of misnomers and challenges, and it makes it difficult to erect those shelters. It makes it difficult to build those affordable housing complexes when we have misinformation and misunderstanding. So, the role of mayor in this space is not just leading the response in terms of providing the budgetary capacity and the direction to expand services and provide more housing, but it's also about educating the public so that we can stay focused on what is the true challenges rather than some notion that if we built a wall around our city that we would have no more homeless people. That simply isn't the case. And that's a part of the challenge, but the frustration is real. And that's why you see mayors like Mayor Go and I engaging so much on this. We know people are frustrated and we're doing our level best to give them real solutions, not the false solutions that sometimes I hear about when I'm going about in the community.
Thank you. Mayor Go, anything to add to that?
Well, Mayor Gloria, very well said. Our residents, our businesses are angry, they're frustrated. It's hard for them to see, even though in Bakersfield, with our pit count numbers flipping, where we have more people who are in shelters than unshelters, our businesses, our residents are still feeling the brunt of what they're experiencing, with people with severe mental health issues going down the streets, being naked, doing things that their children shouldn't see. And that is right. They should not be seeing this. But it's not really an either or. It's not just saying, yes, we're going to fix everything for our businesses, which we must, but we also have to address the reality of the person decomposing before our very eyes. So it's not either or. Yes, we have to continue educating, but as mayors, I think we have to assure our public that we've made progress, but we still have a ways to go. And there are specific strategies that we are considering now that will take us forward. We have to address the root issue of mental health, the root issue of substance abuse in order to make a difference. Our constituents are recognizing that those are root issues, along with affordable housing.
So, Mayor Go, let's pick up on that, because as you know, that we now have care courts in place that will, certainly assist cities and counties in addressing mental health issues. What impact do you think that's going to have in the city of Bakersfield in terms of your ability to address homelessness?
Care Court is one additional tool in our toolbox. I believe it is part of the solution. What we have to, we've been bound now by not being able to help those who are severely mentally ill get the treatment, compel them into treatment. And this is what it's about. It's developing a case plan and helping those who are so mentally ill, who are so bound up that they can't help themselves. And it's going to help us to compel them into treatment. We have to continue, as Carolyn was saying, with that partnership. And the city of Bakersfield is working closely with our county to develop this continuum of care where nothing is falling through the cracks. That's what I see, is we have pieces of the continuum, but there are some gaps where people fall through the cracks.
Great. I'm going to go to Mayor Gloria, and I want to talk about this issue of funding streams and how we should be thinking about the coordination and the partnership of those funding streams between the city and the county level. We have a question from the audience, which is, how are counties and cities coordinating to address homelessness? And I'm wondering if you can talk about that and what it means for your broader regional efforts to take on and tackle the issue of homelessness.
Sure. Well, let me be clear. The funding that we've had come to us from our federal and state partners has been transformational. And I'm deeply grateful, particularly to Governor Newsom and to Speaker Rendon and Pro Tem Atkins, as well as their budget chairs, for the provision of things like HAP funding that has just been a game changer. The fact that they've been giving these direct dollars to cities so that we can plug holes where we can and be really nimble and responsive to opportunities in the community is something that has been very helpful. And my hope, and I believe every mayor in California who is blessed to receive these funds continue to hope that these dollars will be evergreen, and so that we can continue to make these investments. Carolyn mentioned before a fiscal cliff. That is real. And while I believe the state will continue to make these commitments, that certainty of being able to operate these shelters long-term is important. Getting to your question, Lande, I'm in a fortunate position. I have great partners at the County of San Diego who are willing to engage on this issue. The County of San Diego is one of the few counties that actually endorsed Care Court when many of the other counties were skeptical or opposed. I think that speaks to a county that understands and hears the frustrations that Karen and I are talking about from everyday Californians and willing to engage. The most recent shelter that we've opened here in San Diego is a collaboration between the city and the county of San Diego. We're using county land and city dollars to erect a 150-bed shelter. This is the first kind of collaboration of this size and scale in our county. We have one other shelter that we opened last November that's similar in scope. So we are collaborating, and it's really important. Lande, I am the mayor of the city of San Diego, right? I have very blunt instruments for dealing with homelessness. I have sanitation workers and police officers and firefighters and paramedics, right? But I don't have mental health clinicians. I don't have social workers. I don't have behavioral health specialists. The county has those folks. So when we can marry the housing assets the city has with the services the county has, that's when you really get the ability to change someone's life and to get them stably housed for the long term. So my hope is that with efforts like CareCourt that really calls on counties to prioritize these severely mentally ill, that we'll start to see the kinds of reductions in on-street visible homelessness amongst the severely mentally ill that I think is the most concerning to Californians, and allow us to free up the dollars because these people are suitably housed and cared for to be able to give the capacity that they're no longer consuming to the other folks who are unsheltered and hopefully get them off the streets quickly too.
Great. So another audience question that's come in, and I think it's directed at you, Mayor Gloria. And the question is, what have cities done to track the efficacy and effects of measures that you've taken? For example, having 25% of units in affordable housing developments being set aside for formerly unhoused residents. How are you tracking and monitoring that folks who are living on the street are actually getting access to those set aside places to live?
Well, there is a lot of tracking. Most of that work is done by our city's housing commission, as well as our new Department of Homelessness Strategies and Solutions that I established when I became mayor of the city. And so we do see the ability to track numbers. The housing commission maintains those commitments for the set-asides, both for the inclusionary units that we have, the affordability levels, and then the provision of services, particularly for our homeless population. The efficacy of our other efforts, the number of contacts, the number of acceptance of services, the number of graduations out of shelters and into housing, that is tracked by both the Department of Homelessness and the Housing Commission. And our numbers are good, but Lande, let's be clear, they're not good enough, right? And I think it goes back to the question you asked Karen a moment ago. We can open a shelter and tout that, but if there's an encampment in front of someone's business and it's there before the shelter's open and after the shelter's open, then they find it to be ineffectual. It is what you see every day in front of your own eyes. I live in downtown San Diego. That means that I never leave my home without seeing visible homelessness right in my community. And it can be jarring, it can be deflating, but we can't engage in those dark forces. We have to prefer to see these things with optimism and continue to move forward, recognizing that every shelter bed is that opportunity to get off the streets for good. But anyway, the data now analytics is real, and we have a website on our city's webpage that can give people more information if they're interested in our efforts. But let me be very clear, I'm not satisfied, and I can't be satisfied until we have a place for everyone to get off the streets and get into housing.
Great. Mayor Go, the handling of homeless encampments has been one of the more controversial issues facing cities, not only in California, but nationally. Can you talk about your perspective on how to handle encampments and what approach your city has taken towards them?
So certainly we are responding to the clearing of encampments, but also in advance connecting people to services. So as we had heard before, we can't just move people around. Our goal really is to connect people to services. So yes, we cannot allow messes to be around, but at the same time, we're talking about individuals who need mental health and substance abuse services. So we're pairing those as we go. We're actually connecting our street outreach workers and making sure that they talk to the homeless people and try to get them placed. I want to go back to that issue that we were talking about earlier with CareCourt. And what we're finding is as we move our people to our shelters, they need psychiatric and therapeutic help. So the city of Bakersfield is we're devoting $700,000 of our new HAP allocation for a therapist and psychiatrist serving in each of our 4 shelters. This is really about not just getting rid of tents. It's about moving people onto their journey as far as they're able to go.
I appreciate that, because there's a question that came in earlier around now that kind of care course is on the table, what discussion is there around prioritizing mental health clinics and long-term care, that there are some individuals that need to be housed not just temporarily and not just treated temporarily, but treated for years. Is that an issue that cities are able to take on, or that you're able to take on in Bakersfield?
We're working together with our county to address that. As we know, some people are not able to go into a congregate setting. They are so severely mentally ill that they need other types of housing. So we're actually working with our county hospital to create more beds specifically designed for people who need psychiatric beds and detox beds. So in collaboration with our county, what we're seeing is that you cannot just put everybody into permanent supportive housing. There are persons who need other types of housing, and that's what we're considering. So yes, working very closely with our county.
Great. An audience question that just came in, which is that while mental health and substance abuse are a large part of the issue, the audience member says, I'm not hearing anything about the way in which our state's economy has pushed seniors on fixed incomes out of their homes. What can mayors and other leaders do to address the larger root causes of poverty? Let's start with Mayor Gloria.
Give me the easy one, huh, Lande?
Sure.
I think that's the conundrum of a mayor, right? Is that we're a local elected official that's often held responsible for large scale national or international macroeconomic challenges, right? In the city of San Diego, we've done everything from increase our minimum wage, an ordinance I wrote when I was on the city council, to being extremely aggressive with rental relief. Our housing commission has put out over $200 million of assistance, helping roughly I think it's about 18,000 families at this point avoid homelessness, many of them seniors. Right now, we are prioritizing a non-congregate shelter that will be opening soon for our seniors who are homeless. But we have it in many ways feels like you're swimming upstream on this stuff, right? Because whether the Fed is raising or lowering interest rates to, where the dollar is ranked against other stuff, I mean, this is stuff that mayors don't have control over, but we can try and use our influence, whether it's on the local level with things like the minimum wage or try and advocate in Washington or in the state capitol for change. But we are subject to the same whims as everyone else. And the best that we can do is to try and control what we can control. And that's, pro-housing policies that create more roofs that people can live under, kinds of policies like inclusionary housing and the like that make sure that housing isn't just one kind of product, but a multitude of products that are available for diverse populations. These are never our satisfying answers, because yes, there are larger things at work, but get up every day and come here to try and make a difference on those matters. But yeah, it is funny. I think it's our ability to be able to be touched and seen every single day, right? Other executives are far, far away, hundreds of miles, multiple time zones away. Mayors are present in communities, and therefore we're held accountable. But I have to remind people, my name is Todd, not God, right? I can't control all this stuff, but I will absolutely work my heart out on the issues that I can absolutely influence. There's no higher priority for me than this homeless crisis, and this is where I spend the most of my time on.
Great. Earlier in this program, Carolyn Coleman discussed the impact of recent federal and state investment in addressing homelessness, both saying that the resources have been generous and indicating that the federal government hasn't been as significant of a partner as perhaps it should be. What difference have the funds that have come to you made in your ability to address homelessness? And if there were more money from the feds, what would you do with it? How would you allocate it? What difference could it make?
Karen, you want to take that one?
Sure. Well, we are so grateful for the funding that comes in, and it does take funding. So the solutions that Mayor Gloria and I have described earlier, those were made possible because of funding that we receive. But let me give you some examples of what we plan to do ahead, even with the HAP dollars that we're getting. $1.2 million for permanent supportive housing construction, $1 million for new family units at our shelters serving women and children, $700,000 for a therapist and psychiatrist serving each of our 4 major shelters, and $300,000 for street outreach, $400,000 for scattered site youth shelters, and $61,000 to expand access to our homeless data system, HMIS. All of those kinds of things enable us to move forward in solving this homeless crisis. It's not one thing or the other. So all of that funding we are using to move things forward.
Mandy, can I get on this? Because I agree with what Karen just said. And again, deep appreciation of the state of California, Project Home Key, HAP. It's been very helpful. I think it is credit. I think the federal government could do more. And I think President Biden has indicated a willingness to do that in his Build Back Better proposal. He had $150 billion for housing. I will tell you what we need are more housing choice vouchers, period. If we could get more of those, we could make Project Home Key much more impactful. We could definitely address the excessively long wait list. City of San Diego has basically a 12-year wait list for Section 8 assistance, and that's an extreme challenge for homelessness prevention as well as ensuring we're addressing the people who are on the streets. I would hope that the president and Congress could work together to increase the federal government's commitment to this issue. When we can take those with the state dollars we're receiving and leverage with the local funds that we've got, I believe that we can make a significant impact in the number of people who are not just homeless, but people who are on the edges of homelessness that we certainly want to prevent from ever ending up on the street.
I'm going to say amen, amen, and amen to those vouchers. We need those vouchers. Same thing. We have many people who are awaiting space.
So the presence of vouchers, that suggests that there is available shelter, and you need the vouchers to get people into that shelter, not that you have as much of a challenge with shelter itself. Is that correct?
We need both, right?
Yes.
We're short on affordable housing, and we need those vouchers. It's really the whole range of housing. We need affordable housing.
And Lande, we can marry these with projects to actually get projects built. Things that are currently on the drawing board can be shovels in the ground if we had that kind of long-term commitment that vouchers represent. So it is a both and, right? Like we can help people get off the streets, and we can actually use it to create the inventory to allow them to find a place to go. It would be, I think, the most significant thing that could be done to address this issue.
One final question before we have to end our program, and that is the state during the pandemic piloted Project Home Key, Project Room Key. What differences have those made in terms of durable differences in your communities to address the problem of housing for folks who are homeless? Mayor Gloria, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, a lot. I mean, we were able to purchase 2 properties that are a couple hundred units between the 2 of them. People live there right now today. Those are folks who are not in front of someone's business, not in front of someone's school, sleeping in someone's park. These are people who are in a much better place. And our ability to continue to do that is whether or not the state continues to provide those dollars, which we'll happily take. We're currently competing for more rounds of funding, and I'm hopeful that we'll have more roofs that we can put over people's heads. It is a tangible difference. I think this issue does not suffer from words. We have a lack of words. We have too much talking on this thing. There's more doing. What I saw with Home Key is the ability to actually put projects on the ground swiftly in communities and house people right away. Not theoretical, it's real. And people are living there in my city tonight, and they're not on the streets, and that is a good thing.
Great, thank you. Mayor, go.
We were able to use the Home Key for 3 sites, getting 315 units. Same thing as Mayor Gloria said, getting people off the streets. Our cities are on the front lines of this homeless crisis. And I want to reiterate to our state policymakers that we need the assistance in reforming our mental health and substance abuse system, and to keep supporting flexible HAP dollars. That flexibility of dollars is going to make a big difference because each city is unique.
Amen.
You know, we have reached the end of our program, and I could not be more grateful to you, Mayor Gloria, to you, Mayor Go, and also to Carolyn Coleman for joining us today. Thank you so much for your public service. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and know that PPIC stands ready to support you with data and information and anything that you need to help address this problem of housing and homelessness. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank again our sponsors who are listed on our website, and also thank each of you in the audience and online for joining us today. If you pre-registered for this event today, you will receive a survey, and we hope you'll take some time to complete that survey and let us know how you did. If you enjoyed this program, we have another coming up on Thursday, which will actually feature several journalists talking about the upcoming midterm elections and what that means for the state of California. And we want to also just thank each and every one of you for joining us again today. Please be safe and enjoy your day.